Hey, friends. Welcome back to the Legally Legit podcast. I am Paige, owner and lead attorney behind the Legal Page, and your go-to legal expert for small business owners, creative entrepreneurs, and yes, photographers trying to stay legally legit in messy situations. And that is what today's episode is all about. It's a story that's part wild, part heartbreaking, and totally real. Over 30 plus brides hired a wedding photographer, paid in full, and never received their wedding photos. Even worse, some of those weddings were photographed by associate shooters, and those associate shooters now find themselves stuck in the middle because the clients are wanting their photos and have reached out to them because they know that they were the ones shooting there, and the lead photographer is the company that hired them and wasn't present. So these associates had no contracts with the company that hired them, no clarity, and now they just have brides in tears and people like scrambling to do the right thing. So we're going to break this all down from a legal lens. What rights do associate shooters actually have? Can they send the photos to clients in these situations? What about editing the photos with their own editing style? What about copyright ownership? Who owns it now? And what happens when you send these? You send the RAWs, you send the edited images. What do you do as an associate photographer? And then also some claims that the brides may have as well. So let's get into it. Hey there, I'm Paige Griffith, your host, an attorney for small business owners, and the founder of The Legal Page. I help online businesses and creatives get legally legit in no time. In this podcast, I break down and simplify legal talk while providing practical business guidance every step of the way. With over a decade of experience in both entrepreneurship and the law, think of me as your go-to legal resource, here to tackle all those what-if scenarios so that you can focus on what you do best, growing your business. As a gentle reminder and disclaimer, I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney, so be sure to seek legal counsel for personalized advice. Welcome to the Legally Legit podcast. Alrighty, so here is the backstory. A photographer named Christina, and yes, that's the name. There's tons of articles out there, and I will link all of the articles in the show notes so you know that I'm not just making this up. But Christina booked dozens of weddings, took full payment, and then pulled all kinds of weird disappearing acts when it came time to either show up at the wedding or deliver the photos. The tricks were like claiming last minute emergencies, sending an associate shooter in her place, sometimes without even telling the client at all. And then one associate photographer who worked a wedding for this Christina gal recently reached out after seeing news articles and Reddit threads of, 30 plus, 40 plus brides that are now left empty handed. They have no images. And this associate photographer never signed a contract with this Christina gal, got paid hourly, and delivered her raw images to Christina, and kind of thought that that was the end of it. She's like, okay, I got paid. I did my work. Let's move on. Now the bride is contacting her as the associate photographer. I'm not going to name names there. And the bride is basically begging for the photos. And this is over a year ago. The associate photographer honestly kind of feels torn, right? You want to help in this situation, but you don't want to create any more legal debacle than there already is. Legally speaking, it is a kind of a tangled mess, but it can be untangled. And that is what I want to do in today's episode. So the first thing that I want to talk about is when there is no contract, who owns the photo? So under US copyright law, the person who clicks the shutter composes the images, and then that idea is fixed in a tangible medium. So it moves over to the memory card. They own the copyright to that work, unless there's a written contract transferring ownership. So no contract equals associate photographer owns the photos, period. It doesn't mean the client owns the photos. So if Christina didn't have a written work for hire or copyright assignment agreement in place, the associate shooter still holds the rights. And I'm not going to get into the nuances of all of the things I would need to know about this situation, but it's a huge post that came up in our Facebook group, and there was tons of people commenting on it. And then my legal team and I saw it and oh, this is juicy, but also it's a little bit wrong because they posted an update in our group and it says, I was able to speak to an attorney and he basically confirmed that because there was no contract with Christina and because Christina was already paid, there's no damages there, that sending the photos was okay. And now they're actually the bride's property. And I disagree with that. There's nuances there. The copyright still lands with the associate photographer, and it doesn't like automatically transfer to the client just because the client paid for them. What can happen now is that they can release the images to the client without caution, especially because now we've got all kinds of breaches from this Christina gal. And, you know, that kind of like whatever oral agreement, I don't even know if they had a full contract with their clients, hoping maybe they do. And then they can actually claim tons of breach of contract, but breach of oral contract exists too. And the associate photographer now can release the images and they can also license the images. So I would make sure that not only do you have some type of like licensing agreement signed by the clients, I would make sure it's a four-cornered document in this. Sometimes I tell people like you can do email licensing agreements back and forth, but in this situation, like it's already messy. It's already just a legal bomb waiting to explode with probably a class action lawsuit is what I've heard. A lot of these brides are like coming together. They're speaking to attorneys. They're trying to get some type of plaintiff's attorney to take their case. But if you've ever listened to like the Wedding Scammer podcast, if you haven't, oh my God, go listen to it. I like binged it so hard. It was so good. But this is like not uncommon, which is unfortunate. I don't want to have to say that out loud, but this is like a common thing in the wedding industry, and particularly like with photographers. The Wedding Scammer was about, I think, a caterer, if I recall. But it was like fascinating that, oh, this is coming up again. And then in our thread, they were like, oh, this happened in my area too. Like it's a really terrible situation that occurs all the time in the wedding industry. So if you're like kind of associated with this, you're an accomplice, not in the criminal aspect, but like you're the associate photographer that now has the images that now these clients want, but there's like kind of a contractual breach mess, tons of civil and like criminal claims that could be made. Please go get a contract signed before you release these images. I also want you to contemplate having a model release signed by the couple. If then they're saying like, oh my gosh, we would love to get these images from you. You're the associate. You're the only one who has access to them. And this associate, like lovely of them, backed up these images, which I suggest you do if you're a second shooter or an associate for these situations. If you learn anything, make sure you do that. Don't just hand over the memory card and be like, peace. So not only get a licensing agreement signed, but you have some leverage here. It's not bad leverage. I'm just like, well, you have the images and now you're willing to give them over, and you have this other Christina gal's kind of like over there, like out in left field. Doesn't really matter now in terms of you giving these images to the client. You can release them just with caution. Licensing agreement, but also model release. And this is where I'm saying you have leverage here. I'm trying not to like leverage in a very kind leverage way, if that makes sense. If you could now probably use the images for your portfolio or blog or promotional purposes. And I bet the clients are going to say okay to that because you're going to be the good guy that saves the day and gives them the images. Now, if you're giving the raw images to them, I really want you to get a raw image like distribution licensing agreement in place. And we have that, and I'll make sure that I link it for you in the episode description so that you can see why when you give raw photos, it can open up a whole nother can of worms. I'm not going to get into that, but just make sure you have a licensing agreement if you are doing raws. And then if you are editing the images as well, that's kind of where like you might have some leverage to like do a model release and things along those lines. So yeah, just make sure that you're protecting yourself with a short contract or a release of your own as an associate before you distribute the images. Now, if that wasn't enough, I've been talking a lot about this associate photographer. There was a second shooter as well. So Christina and her company is like the one that hired this associate. And then there was also a second shooter. So the associate was saying in our Facebook post, like, I don't know what to do here. Like, do I have a separate contract with the second shooter now to obtain the copyright to those photos and handle this whole situation as if it was just my bride? And the answer to that is like, Yes and no. I think because now that second shooter, like first and foremost, do they have a contract with this Christina gal? Probably not if you don't as the associate. And then just because you're the associate, it's kind of like you have two separate photographers here that don't have a work made for hire clause and don't have any intellectual property expectations regarding their images. And so copyright ownership actually lands with the second shooter with their images and vice versa, like you with the associate photographer, as I've already said, meaning you need to go talk to the second shooter if you know who that is and be like, what are you willing to do in this situation? I'm willing to like take this on basically as my own client. I'm willing to like edit all the images and distribute it to them. Are you okay with that? If so, will you give me access to the images if you still have them and have them backed up? And then you're absolutely going to want to technically have a second shooter contract with the second shooter, or at least a licensing agreement that then assigns all copyright ownership of those images over to you. And then you would have the right to distribute them as you see fit. But the second shooter also has the right here to do whatever they want. Like they can either give you the images or not give you the images. They can either give the client the images or not give them the images if they still have them. Yeah, contracts are absolutely the name of the game, and make sure that you're having everything in written format, signed, 4-page documents. Send these contracts online. Please don't do like yes and no via text or via DMs with these clients. Like they can use that against you. So just don't do it. And be very careful because this is an emotional mess and clients can get very, very weird very fast. So yeah, I would be careful. Of course, if you want to edit those second shooter images and then send them, you could. I wouldn't probably ask for payment for the editing portion of it because it could kind of make things worse. And their attorney said this as well when they asked them, like, you know, it's you don't want to double down on the payment because then the clients are thinking like they have to pay double. They already paid this Christina gal and they're probably going through legal recourses and to get those damages back. So, okay, hopefully I feel like I'm everywhere on this, but that was kind of like my synopsis. There's no contract between you and the other second shooter photographer. So definitely have like the client. And I say spouses, they kept saying like bride here, but always, 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 always have both spouses in the images, sign the contract. So not just the bride. And also like there's sometimes just not brides in images. So like you have to be very, very clear. That's why I use the word, an all encompassing term of spouses sign the contract with you and be very, very specific. Yeah. And then you could do like additional things in terms of contacting the original or like the company that hired you, this Christina gal, like a certified letter, explaining that, you know, they have this amount of time. Should it go to court? You know, this is what you will be claiming with breach of contract. You own these images. There was no contract in place. Like making sure that you're disclosing to this company in case they were to ever come back to you and be like, no, you don't own those images. Why did you give them to the clients? Like you do. You didn't have a contract that stated otherwise, even if you were paid. And I think that's the kicker here is people are like, well, the second shooter was paid and the associate was paid. So yeah, there is some like compensation there, but there's so many breaches from this other photographer and it doesn't matter. The services may have been paid for, but you don't have a contract stating that the copyrighted images have been paid for and assigned fully over to them. Maybe there would have been a different negotiation or discussion surrounding how much the second shooter and associate would have charged for that. Okay, you're getting into my legal brain here. Definitely talk to an attorney in these situations. And then, it's an unfortunate situation that I don't want this for you to be in. It's scary. I'm sorry that these associates and second shooters were put into these situations. But then we have people in our comment section saying like it's happening in every single state since the pandemic. And it sucks because we as wedding photographers hear of this, and then we run legit photography businesses or legit videography businesses or legit DJ or planning businesses. And then all of us in the wedding industry get a bad rap because others lack ethics. Nicole said this in a comment, and I was like, yes, like this is what the issue is. It's a trust recession because there's bad people out there that are exploiting clients and customers. And frauding them and defaming them and like doing all kinds of things where then the whole industry is getting a bad rap. So yeah, I don't suggest you ever have verbal agreements. I don't suggest you ever have like email documentation or text or DM agreements. Please go get a 4-corner document signed in all instances here. And I don't know if you learn anything from this. Like if you like to be an associate photographer or a second shooter, don't do it without a contract in place. Like, can you imagine? I know some of us have the best of intentions, but you have no idea what's going to occur down the road. And if I'm getting paid for something and I own images and we know all of these things that are happening in the industry, like you never know who you're working with or who's hiring you. And I want to make sure that we're setting expectations and clear like intellectual property rules and regulations from the get-go so that I know how to interact with clients if this were to come up. So yeah, definitely do that. All right. I just want to quickly get into like what legal options do the clients have. Certainly they have breaches of contract or oral agreements. If they paid for photos and they received nothing, that's like a clear breach, like a material breach of the contract or oral agreement. They would win any day of the week, but the problem is even if they go to small claims court and they win and they receive a judgment against them, now they have to go like get that judgment, and file liens against the company. And like the company is probably like just a fraudulent company. They're just going to run around continuing to do all these things. I.e. the wedding scammer. Go listen to that podcast. I'm really hyping them up right now, but that's exactly what happened. Like just because they have all these judgments and liens against them doesn't mean you're actually going to get your money back. You're probably not ever going to get your money back unless you file chargeback claims or things along those lines. This is specifically a legitimate fraudulent charge and fraudulent claim that can be made on a charge that you had with your credit card or something along those lines. You also have a lot of failure to perform claims, legal claims that can be made. Like it sounds like Christina never attended the weddings, never delivered any final products. So you have a lot of that. You have refund options. Obviously, I said small claims court, formal civil claims as well. You could go to state court. And then chargebacks, like I said. There's a lot of fraud possibility there. If there's like this pattern of deception that has emerged, like taking money with no intent to deliver, and it sounds like they have this with class action lawsuits, that could be escalated to criminal fraud. Just know that deception and criminal charges, like you're now a small fish in a big sea of criminal charges that are landing on prosecutors' desks. So you can file like police reports, the clients could, or state attorney general complaints. Like I would go ham on that. I would go ham on consumer, fraudulent claims, consumer protection. If you can go through the AG on that, your state AG, that's attorney general for short. I would just complain. The more that they get, and like if 30 to 40 clients can come together and submit all of that, the higher that a potential criminal charge could come about from a prosecutor. But it feels like coordinated civil action here is the best bet, i.e. a class action lawsuit. It may be possible, but that does get complex pretty quickly. And usually you have to find plaintiffs' attorneys or class action attorneys that are willing to take on your case. And here, unless it's someone, if you're willing to pay, then great. Like plaintiffs' attorneys will take that on. But if you're not, then plaintiffs' attorneys are kind of on a contingency basis, like contingent if they win, but what money are they going to win? Because this person is just like running around frauding everyone and deceiving everyone. And, like I said, they might get all of these claims that you might win the civil action, but then you have all these judgments out there that are never going to be paid. And that is also what's being contemplated by class action attorneys and plaintiffs' attorneys. So civil action seems more appropriate in this instance. Criminal action could occur. I know some criminal action did occur in other cases, but that's kind of when everyone's doubling, tripling down that are affected clients, with all of the various ways that I just talked about, like police reports, state AG complaints, going through consumer protection agencies in your state. There's obviously like lots of ways you could do this pro se. There's lots of ways you could maybe have someone do things pro bono for you. So look into that as well. Legal resources are out there in your state. And so I would definitely suggest that for brides. Now I want to go back to what should a second shooter do in this instance? Because if you were a second shooter, then there was most likely some type of lead photographer there, I would hope. And it sounds like if Christina didn't go, then there was absolutely an associate that went. And sometimes there was a second shooter associated with that associate. Associated with it. So it's fine. It's fine. The second shooter probably didn't sign a contract, but they did get paid. And then they still delivered the files to this Christina gal, just like the associate did. Alrighty, so in a nutshell, that's kind of my hot legal take on this issue, and it's unfortunate that it keeps coming up. I really wanted to address the associate shooter and second shooter debacle. If you're ever stuck in a similar situation, here are kind of my final thoughts regarding this. Number one, I don't want you to panic if you're an associate photographer or a second shooter when a client reaches out to you in this situation, because you probably have more rights than you think copyright wise. Step one, though, is like review your communications and payment history. So review what was said. Was it via email? Do you have text? Do you have DMs like with this company that hired you, this Christina gal? And then payment history. When did they pay you and what did they pay you for? Was it just for the services? Was it also for delivery of the images? Did they say you needed to cull those images? Like, was there a little bit of like a nuanced oral agreement there, or like quasi written agreement there? And then refresh yourself on everything that did occur. Number two is protect yourself with a one-page agreement or some type of licensing agreement before sending any images to the client. And kind of step 2/3 is like get a model release from those clients, the spouses, if then they are saying it's okay to use the photos publicly, because you probably don't know what the contract says between the clients and Christina or the company that hired them. And so I would just make sure you get a model release specifically from the couple too. And then, clients, just remember, like, you have legal remedies. You don't have to stay silent in these situations. In fact, I would suggest that you don't. Of course, that doesn't bode great on the reputation of the wedding industry and like photographers and videographers. But at the end of the day, like, we are in a trust recession, and the public is going to put people on blast for these things. And at the end of the day, like, being in the wedding industry, for a decade plus, and seeing clients and being a photographer, like, the most important thing to them was the memories that they have of that day. And the good industry professionals are going to come out on the other side here. Like, clients can sniff bad intentions, bad reputations, and they can certainly know when you are in it for the right reasons. And if you're an associate or a second shooter in this situation and you're trying to do what's best for the clients, like, that will only go well for you. So just like, in today's day and age, this isn't fun to deal with, especially with how much like blasting can go on. And I would suggest that they take it more to like legal situations, but also like, talking in client groups about this person. It sounds like this was in New York and kind of New Jersey area, and that people knew about this. Like, it's very well known. So people know in the industry when other people are doing bad things, and they will suggest like, don't work with them, like, be careful. They'll post about this in like client, like bride or couple groups that they're into. So yeah, I think information is power. But also be aware that sometimes facts and circumstances are best suited for legal recourse, whether civilly or criminally, and don't do everything online, because that there's nothing you're going to get out of that in terms of damages or like the legal action that you're actually seeking, or like whatever outcome you are seeking, if you blast someone too much, it could deter an associate or a second shooter for even sending the images to you. So just be very careful if you're a client. I'm going to stop there. But of course, if you're an associate shooter or a second shooter, and you're a photographer in these instances, be very careful, be cautious, but know your copyrighted works are yours and that you can do as you wish, especially if you don't have a contract. And of course, if you do anything maybe in 2025 and 2026 with associating or second shooting for other photographers, please have a contract in place first. Okay? All right. I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for contract templates, blogs, and additional legal resources. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend or on Instagram with your favorite takeaway, and make sure you tag me at The Legal Page. Sharing is one of the best ways you can support the show. And if you've been tuning in for a while and you are finding value in these episodes, it would mean the world to me if you popped over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and left a rating and review. Hearing your feedback absolutely inspires me to continue creating podcast content. Lastly, you can join my free Facebook group at tlpfacebook.com, and this is where you'll get access to me, my legal team, and thousands of other entrepreneurs for unlimited business and legal Q&A. Until next time, my friend.